Okay, welcome everyone to the first meeting of Central Jersey Electric Auto Association, first meeting in 2021. Today is Wednesday, January 6th, and there was some funny things happening in Capitol, and that's pretty much my 2 cents because we have full agenda. So let me project this. Can everybody see the slide?
Not yet.
Oh, you know what? Because I didn't press the share button. Share screen. How about this? Share. Okay, how about now?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So again, welcome. And here's our agenda. We will have Eunice Wong, Princeton Activist, and she's also artist and teacher and many things. And she will take us through briefly about what is happening in Princeton. I visited the meeting of the Environmental Commission in Princeton, and I was so amazed how residents are taking activities in terms of improving the environment in the town. And specifically, Eunice was talking about the gas leaf blowers and why we should ditch them. And it's not just about replace them with electric. There are some other things, and Eunice will talk about it. After that, we will switch gears to winter driving tips. We'll share experience. I have some slides, and then I would like others to pitch in and share how they deal with the lower, shorter range during cold weather. I'll go to chair report. And specifically, I will talk about how was our drive-thru light show last month. Then I'll talk about the ChargEVC developing phase 2 of ChargeUp New Jersey program. If you remember, they partnered with RideWise, and there was a first round of virtual event early in December, and next week will be the second one. So I certainly recommend everyone to attend it. We'll talk about it. And then upcoming webinars and social. So I'm going to stop sharing, and I would like to invite Eunice. Now, I think I need to give you co-host. So yes, Eunice, please welcome, and we would like to hear your story.
Hi, so as Stan said, I'm a resident of Princeton. I have to start out by saying that I am not at all an expert on the subject of gas-powered leaf blowers. I'm just a fed-up resident. And I didn't know anything about leaf blowers before Thanksgiving, basically. And so my story is I'm a professional actor, and since the pandemic, I've been recording audiobooks from my home studio. So that means I'm sitting in a professional isolation booth, double-walled, in my garage with a very high-powered microphone. And the leaf blowers were driving me out of my mind. I mean, my microphone was picking up leaf blowers from seemingly across town, and they did not stop for hours and hours and hours every day. And I had to wait until it got dark out to do my work. And this went on for a while, and I finally decided that I was going to launch like this all-out campaign against them. What I didn't realize was that other people had already been fed up with the gas-powered leaf blowers because so many people now are working from home. And so it turns out that there was already a sort of foundation in Princeton. People have been writing letters to the editor of our local paper. There's a group called Quiet Princeton, which I'm now working for, that has been sort of pushing for an ordinance or some kind of change with the use of gas-powered leaf blowers for a couple of years now. So I kind of dove into it. I did like a deep dive on research, and I put together a petition on change.org and circulated it, and it ended up getting over 375 Princeton signatures and 1,900 signatures worldwide. And I presented this petition to the Princeton Environmental Commission, which is the meeting that Stan was at. And it's interesting, Stan, that you mentioned how impressed you were by that meeting, because I found out later that that meeting broke all attendance records for environmental commission meetings because of the leaf blower issue. I mean, people were coming out in droves. And that particular meeting was a goal setting meeting for the Environmental Commission. And so they were going to determine what their primary goals for 2021 were.
And let me jump into that. You know, I attended the Princeton Environmental Commission meeting only once. And that was the one when you were there. So, and I asked them in the email later whether this attendance was normal, and I still didn't get answer, because I felt so so bad that our environmental commission, if we have 2 people, this is success. You know, so and we already had a meeting on December 21st, which was a few days after the Princeton, and I reported. I told them, hey, you know, Princeton, they are doing a great job. They have lots of public interest, you know, and there were some other technical details, but anyway, this is just
so funny, because it was not at all a typical meeting in terms of attendance, but it was that particular issue. That's how huge it is in our town. So many people are fed up with the noise and the pollution.
Yeah.
But
I'm also sharing the slide, and the link, the website that you were talking about is there's the list of quiet landscapers. This is the Quiet Princeton, right? So you are part of that organization, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And so that particular link you've got up there is, as it says, it's a list of landscapers, professional landscapers in Princeton who will do landscaping work without leaf blowers if you request them to. And they also have a great resources page with tons of information. And so that's really worth checking out. So the meeting that you're talking about, the Environmental Commission, the commissioners were so impressed by the turnout that they did decide to make addressing the issue of gas-powered leaf blowers a #1 priority for 2021. And the way it works in Princeton, this was all new to me, is that the Environmental Commission then passes on these lists of recommendations to the municipal council, who will then determine their list of priorities and goals actually this week. So, so that's sort of the backstory for how this all started happening for me. And then I also presented the petition to council the next week after the Environmental Commission meeting, and they were really supportive. They've been hearing the complaints for months, literally months, since people started working from home, because gas-powered leaf blowers are now no longer being used just for leaves. So it's not limited to autumn. People they're using them for blowing debris and dust and, you know, everything. And so they're being used at least 3 seasons out of the year. So I just want to go through some of the research that I kind of uncovered in the process of preparing for these meetings and writing the petition. So I started my campaign because of the noise. I couldn't work, and there are a lot of, you know, thinkers and writers and creative types in Princeton, and a lot of us are working now from home. So I looked into the difference between the noise of a gas-powered leaf blower and the noise of an electric leaf blower. And what's really, really interesting is that while they may have the same official decibel rating, you know, decibels being the rating chart for level of sound. They could both be rated at, say, 75 decibels. What's interesting is that the sound profile of a gas-powered leaf blower has these low frequencies, and it's those low frequencies that allow it to travel these enormous distances and to penetrate building walls and windows. And the electric leaf blowers, even if they're rated the same level, they don't have those low frequencies. So it's more like the sound of a vacuum cleaner, which is kind of annoying, but it doesn't penetrate in the same way as the gas-powered leaf blowers, and it affects fewer houses. So if your neighbor was using an electric one, you might hear it, and maybe the house next to you would hear it. But if it's a gas-powered leaf blower, it affects this tremendous radius of houses. And that's something I had no idea about. So when people say, oh, well, you know, electric has the same sound level, that's not the whole story, right? They're measured in a way that doesn't take into account the different frequencies. So that's a really important point. And then I started looking into the environmental cost of gas-powered leaf blowers. I found out this incredible fact that the New York Times reported, saying that 30 minutes of using a gas-powered two-stroke engine leaf blower, which is the most common kind, produces the same hydrocarbon emissions as driving a Ford pickup truck from Maplewood, New Jersey to Juneau, Alaska. And that's 30 minutes of using a gas-powered leaf blower. And these are machines that are in constant use on work days, you know, for like 6 to 8 hours a day, day after day after day. And the emissions are staggering. And the two-stroke engine, these are the same engines that are used in developing countries in scooters and small vehicles. And they were called super polluters by, of course, now I forget which article it was or which study, but they're called super polluters, and they've been phased out of use in cars because they're so dirty. And yet they're allowed in gas-powered leaf blowers. But then you have to compare the use of how long is a car on average used every day. So the average use of a car is 2 hours a day. And again, you look at the average use of a gas-powered leaf blower every day, and you're looking at like basically daylight hours, 6 to 8 hours a day. And so you start to add up the environmental cost of that, and it's kind of staggering. So again, I just want to emphasize 30 minutes of using a gas-powered leaf blower produces the same hydrocarbon emissions as driving a truck from New Jersey to Alaska, which is insane. And what else? And of course there's health. So in Munich, a study found that after a new airport opened, they were looking at children in particular. The stress hormone levels soared in children after this new airport opened. Their epinephrine levels rose almost 50%, norepinephrine more than doubled, these are all stress hormones, and their systolic blood pressure went up about 5 points on average. And it's been proven that gas-powered leaf blowers create high levels of formaldehyde, benzene, and smog-forming chemicals which cause dizziness, headaches, asthma attacks, heart and lung disease, cancer, and dementia. They create clouds of industrial pollutants, pollen, fertilizer, pesticides, dried animal poop, and demolition debris like lead and asbestos if there's been any construction going on. And of course, this is all going into the air that the community breathes. But then you think about the workers who are having to use these machines for their workday and the kind of toxins that they're inhaling. So you look at it, it's really an environmental issue, and it's a civil rights issue, because certainly here in Princeton, most of our landscape workers are undocumented, low-wage immigrants. They're usually not wearing protective headgear. And even if they are, you've got a machine creating 100 decibels of noise at their ears if not more. Sometimes they're rated like 115 decibels at the operator's ear. And there's a great quote from a prominent ENT physician. He's also a professor at the University of Illinois. So not only are what they're breathing, but of course their hearing is being damaged. And so this doctor, Dr. Robert Myers, says, when I see a crew using gas-powered leaf blowers, I think 10 years from now, they'll be deaf, and who will take care of them then? And you think about, why is this happening? This is happening so that privileged and wealthy Princetonians can have unnaturally manicured lawns, which leads us to another point, Stan, what you were saying. We don't have to use electric leaf blowers. We don't have to use leaf blowers at all. Other methods of dealing with leaves include mulching mowers, so that the leaves get shredded up as the mower passes over them. And then the nutrients return to the soil, which is what's supposed to happen, right? And this idea of manicuring the lawns, of removing the leaves, removing the nutrients, and then what do we have to do? We have to put chemicals back in the lawns to replace the nutrients that we took away with the leaves. So leaving the leaves ultimately is the most environmentally friendly choice. Maybe composting the leaves.
It's cheapest.
It is the cheapest. And
that's what the businesses don't like. They want to make money on the more complicated, less efficient process.
Right. Although what's interesting is that Maplewood, New Jersey passed an ordinance which banned gas leaf blowers, let me think, from May 15th to September 30th. So the summer months, basically. And they discovered that the ordinance actually helped save money for the landscaping companies, which they were not expecting at all. And they were saving money because they didn't have to maintain these gas-powered leaf blowers, which apparently are very costly to maintain, and they didn't have to buy fuel, and they were spending less time at each house. So at each client, before, what they were doing was mowing, trimming, and blowing leaves. And when the blowing leaves got taken away as an option, they were just mowing and trimming. So they could finish up more quickly and then move on to the next house. So they were actually able to do more in less time. And there has been no evidence. So there have been over 200 municipalities in the country that have banned or strictly regulated gas-powered leaf blowers. There's been no evidence, even anecdotally, that these ordinances or regulations have hurt landscaping companies.
Eunice, and coincidentally, we have on call Tracy Woods from Maplewood.
Oh, wow.
So
Great.
she could probably attest to what you are saying.
Yeah.
Yes,
And
you're very right.
yeah. And what's amazing is that people are just stuck in this mindset of, we need these toxic, health damaging, environmentally destructive machines to do this work. And in fact, if you look at the institutions and the cities around the country that have said, no, we don't need them, they're doing fine. So for instance, the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C., which is a massive piece of property with lots of trees, it's on the East Coast, they use electric leaf blowers. They use electric equipment. They don't permit any kind of gas-powered lawn equipment on their property. Harvard University, also a massive campus on the East Coast with lots of big shade trees, does not use gas-powered leaf blowers. And so it is possible. And Stan, I saw you had a link to Zachary Klein's testimony.
Yes, it's included in the deck, and I put the link to my deck to the chat.
Yeah.
So everybody has access to it, because when I share the screen, you cannot click on it, but when you open my presentation, then it's clickable.
Yeah, well, that's a very, very interesting testimony, and I recommend, I urge you all to take a quick look at it. What it is the testimony of the owner of a landscape company in Washington, D.C., who uses only electric equipment. And it's in front of the DC Council Committee of the whole hearing when they were trying to decide whether to enact this 3-year phase-in in Washington, D.C. to switch from gas machines to electric machines. And so this is Zach Klein. His company only uses electric machines. And he says, I would not be here today if it were not viable to run a successful landscaping business using battery-powered equipment. And again, remember, this is Washington, D.C., so lots of trees. This is not out in California where it's like, you know, palm trees and desert. Also interesting, he says, battery-powered equipment, although maybe somewhat more expensive to purchase up front, comes with a much lower cost of ownership and maintenance compared with gasoline-powered equipment. We maintain a wide range of properties in the greater Washington, D.C. area, including low-end residential, high-end residential, and commercial properties.
Yes, Eunice, and this is where we electric vehicle owners, we totally resonate with that, because electric vehicles, they are also a little bit more expensive, even though the pricing is constantly going down, but the cost of ownership is just substantially lower versus gas car. And the longer you own it, the more you save. The more you drive, the more you save. So keep going.
Yes, and Chuck Elkins, who runs Quiet Clean DC, said in his testimony, let's see whether I can find it, or I can just paraphrase it. He said that gas-powered machines in commercial use, because they're used continuously, they wear out anyway within a couple of years. And so they constantly need replacing. So when you come to the end of a cycle of, you know, the life of one of these gas-powered leaf blowers, that's a perfect time to jump in and, you know, invest in an electric powered machine, which will then over time pay dividends on your investment up front. Gosh, what else? I guess that's pretty much it. It's the sound profile, the health problems, the environmental problems, the workers' issues. I don't know. Does anyone have any questions? It's 6:54, so I don't want to go over.
No, that was
will.
fantastic.
Will you help us to create groups in our own municipalities to take on this issue? I mean, like literally while we were talking, I created a Facebook group that has references to Quiet Princeton, and I am seriously going to like post this on the Metuchen page because I know there will be plenty of support for this here.
Yeah. I would recommend you go to a group called Quiet Communities, Inc. And this is a group that is run by Jamie Banks, and it specifically helps people create groups like Quiet Princeton to gather, you know, people together to work on this issue. I don't know the exact website. I think if you just Google Quiet Communities.
Yeah, I'm at it now.
There's also a Quiet Maplewood group that's recently been formed, and you'll be happy to know that there's legislation before the an ordinance before the Township Council that just passed the first reading that, excuse me, further restricts the year-round usage of.
And has it been passed, or what's the state on that?
Well, ordinances need 2 readings before they can be passed, and I think it just went through the first one and passed the first reading with, you know, a lot of support. That was the expectation. I actually have to check the Zoom and see if it went through.
Right. Wow, that's amazing. The other thing I wanted to quickly point out is people often say, well, how can this possibly be enforced? Right? This is, if we see a leaf blower, by the time we call whoever it is and they get out here, they're going to be gone. And so the way DC has handled it, which I think is kind of a brilliant idea, citizens, residents can report using something called a citizen affidavit. So it's not done through the police. You can take a picture with your phone, and it's also easy to identify by visual glance, whether it's a gas or an electric machine. What doesn't work is trying to regulate by sound level. So if you look at some ordinances, they might say, you know, machines over 70 decibels are not permitted. Well, like, who's going to be running around with a sound meter checking on the level of the leaf blower next door? Nobody. So that's unenforceable. So you don't want to do that. You can regulate by the type of machine very easily, and you can regulate by using citizen affidavits, using pictures from your phone, by taking down the address of the landscaping truck or whoever. And I thought Maplewood's solution for imposing fines at a pretty high level was smart, because apparently what was happening in Maplewood, and Tracy, you probably know this, is that wealthier homeowners were paying the fine for the landscaping companies. So they'd say, oh, just use the leaf blowers, we'll pay the $100. But then they jacked it up to $500 for the first offense, and then $1,000 for the next offense, and $1,500 for the third offense and every offense thereafter. So at that point, people were less ready to say, I'll pay the fine.
Caleb, we cannot hear you. Try again. No.
How about now?
Yes, now.
Oh, sorry about that. Eunice, I have a question for you, but I apologize if you've already covered this. I was busy at the beginning of this call. Was there a period of time from when the ordinance was passed before it took effect, like a full year or a full season? Because what I'm thinking is, as a homeowner, I'll admit I own a gas leaf blower. I've owned it for 10 years probably. But so it would affect me if I had to upgrade to an electric one, which I'd like to do. But for a commercial landscaper, they probably go through equipment fairly quickly. So if you had a 1 year period of time from when the law was enacted until it took effect, it wouldn't hurt them that much, because they have to replace their equipment annually anyway, not necessarily every year, but
Right.
they have to rotate through.
Yeah, I mean, actually, we're not at an ordinance stage yet in Princeton. A lot of us are just trying to get an ordinance on the table, which I'm pretty confident is going to happen. But then we have to see what's going to be in the ordinance.
So
and
maybe Tracy can address whether it applies for residents as well, or whether it is only for contractors in Maplewood.
The past ordinance, the one that's already enacted, is just for contractors, and residents can use whatever they want if they're maintaining their own lawn. The new ordinance, and you know what, I'm going to take this, I'm going to have an asterisk here because I don't have it in front of me, but I believe that it requires homeowners during that period of time in the summer to not use gas-powered leaf blowers either.
Yeah, and let me just jump in there. I believe that was because Maplewood was actually sued by the professional landscaping company, because the first ordinance said that homeowners were allowed to. So they said that was
discriminatory.
Exactly. But to continue your question, Quiet Princeton has actually drafted sort of a blueprint of an ordinance, and it does include a phase-in period of a year. And let me think, do I have it here? I do. So the idea is to have a phase 1 for 1 year to permit gas-powered leaf blowers only during the fall cleanup period, and then to permit electric leaf blowers during the whole year. And then in phase 2, after a whole year, to prohibit gas-powered leaf blowers year-round. And this is kind of our ask for more than we think we'll get ordinance. But again, I have to go back to DC. They had a 3-year phase-in, which I think was really smart. 3 years is a long time, and a lot of people want more immediate action. but it certainly gave companies and residents time to switch over and adjust. And I know what's happening here in Princeton as well, on top of the sort of legislative push, is that there's a group called Sustainable Princeton, which is working on outreach and education to residents to create demand for sustainable landscaping, and outreach to landscaping companies to provide workshops on how to transition to electric leaf blowers, or even to no leaf blowers at all. The idea being that if we just push an ordinance through and say these machines are banned, they're no longer allowed, there's going to be a backlash, right? Because people will be totally unprepared. They won't know why it's happening, and there'll be a lot of resistance. It won't be able to be enforced, because for enforcement, you're relying on the community. So that step is also really important, to have that education and sort of community preparation first.
Great. Do we have any more questions? If not, I would like to thank Eunice one more time. It was really fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And you are welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting. We're just going to switch to the next part, and I'm going to share screen again because
I'm actually gonna duck out because I have to go feed these little ones.
Okay, good. Totally
But it was
understood.
great
Totally
to
understood.
talk.
But one more thing, be prepared that you will get invitation from Franklin Township.
For what?
Environmental Commission. We are because we got really inspired by that. Okay.
Okay. All right. All right.
So,
I can talk about this for ages.
thank you very much. Have a good
Okay.
night.
Take care, everyone. Bye.
Okay, so so these are the links. Now, winter driving tips. Wait a second. So I'll go through first the basic physics of winter driving and some information I sourced online, and I'll talk. I would like everyone to pitch in, and also I have range tool for an EV, which I discovered today. So this slide has information from Fleet Karma. It's not related to Karma Fisker, okay, because it spells with C. By the way, the Fisker Karma split into two brands. Anyway, so here you can see on one side is the typical electric vehicle. I mean, typical as it was at the time of writing, which was Nissan Leaf. On the other side is whatever gasoline vehicle. It looks like Honda. So here you can see that depending whether you operate in Fahrenheit or Celsius, this is regular temperature. And if you go to freezing point, you lose 20% range. But if you go to 0 Fahrenheit, which is minus 18 Celsius, you lose 29%. Now, on the other hand, with the gas car, you are losing 12% to freezing and 19%. So in speaking of percentage, you are losing less, right? Well, why is that? Because the gas car is already so inefficient that the percentual impact of winter driving is much, much less. Now, what are the causes of the range shrinkage? Now, as most of us would guess, the number one is the heating the cabin. So in electric car, it's up to 43%, while in a gas car, it's only 4%. And then we also need to actively heat components. Well, we are specifically talking about the battery. So if you have thermal management, you are losing some energy, but if you don't heat, you are actually losing even more because the battery has lower, capacity. So it accounts to about 22%, while in gas car, it's just 1%. Less efficient components, right? So here, actually, the electric vehicle shines because it loses only 7%. Cold engine performs much worse. It needs to be warmed up. It needs to be heated up. So that's why you get 14%. But the motor, electric motor, it works just as good as the hot motor. So that's why the impact is much lower. Here, I would also like to mention that to start electric car at Arctic temperature is about as easy as at ambient temperature, because we don't need to crank the motor, while the gas engine needs to be cranked up. Tires. We have 13% loss in electric, while 4% in internal combustion. And I was thinking, why is that? And I think the major reason is that because most electric vehicles have low rolling resistance tires, and so they are very efficient versus conventional tires. But then when you put them into winter, into the slush of the snow and ice, then it kind of cancels out. And so the percentage decrease is higher. Excessive idling, again, electric car wins, but well, I shouldn't say again. In this case, electric car wins because gas car, of course, is using energy during idling, but it's using more. And a warm up as well. Yeah, so that's related to warm up. And the air density, it's pretty much flush, the same. And fuel blend, I don't know exactly what that means. Of course, for electric, it doesn't make any difference. For gas, it's slightly lower. So, but here it's interesting chart. So even though the percentage drop in range is higher, in absolute scale, it actually doesn't make, as much difference as in the gas case. So the saving by driving electric in regular temperature is projected to be 12 cents, freezing 13.9, and Arctic freezing is 14.8. So that's very interesting. I was not actually aware of this. So to me, it came as a surprise that by driving electric car at lower temperatures, it's actually more saving, even more saving versus conventional vehicle. So there are several tips. Some of them I found online. And so obviously the first one is to minimize the use of cabin heating. Now, this is easy to say, but it could be difficult to execute because one of the things that we are facing is the windshield fogging, which is a safety issue. So we want to make sure that the windshield is always clear. I can tell you from my own experience that I first tried to just blow outside air into the windshield without cooling or heating. And if it's not enough, it depends on what's the temperature outside. I either, well, preferably I use air conditioning to dry the air. But sometimes I have to use both air conditioning and a little bit of a heating. Because if the cold air overcools the windshield, then there's actually condensation on the outer side of the windshield, and that doesn't help either. Then you have to use windshield wipers. Then make the most of it's pre-timed heating system, which means preheat, specifically preheat. So in the morning before you leave, you want to preheat the vehicle from the grid. That doesn't impact the range. Also, to use indoor parking facilities where possible. Of course, it's tricky because here we are kind of tackling into the equity here. Not everybody has garage, but if you do have, then it's much better to use. Now, these three are very unique to cold weather. Everything else, if you follow, it helps to increase range even in other conditions, in a warmer weather. So you want to check your tire pressure, make sure that it's properly inflated, or I want to say I overinflate the tires by 10 to 15%. It's perfectly fine. You want to drive conservatively. And in winter, actually, you want to drive conservatively anyway, particularly because if it's very slippery, then it's actually dangerous. Use the eco mode, and you want to know where are your fast chargers, so that you want to be prepared in case that you need them. And obviously, you don't want to forget to winterize your vehicle. This is more of a safety issue. It's not much about giving you more range. And here is the range tool for an EV. So this is the link. If you go to this link, it will get you. So this is just a GIF image. But when you go to that link, you would select which vehicle you have, which model year, what is the battery size. You want to select whether you operate in metric or standard. And then you slide this thing to show what is the temperature that you want to calculate the range. And this icon of the vehicle is moving back and forth, showing you what is the typical range and what is the lowest expected, the red bar, and the highest. What it also shows that the highest range is at temperature in Celsius is 21, in Fahrenheit it's 70 something. Yeah, so this is very cool, very nice. I certainly recommend everyone to use it. When you and that also gives you option to account for battery degradation. So if you have a model year that is more than a year, it actually has the algorithm to account for multiples year of the battery degradation. So this is very cool. I tried to use it for my old Leaf, and without battery degradation, it would give me 95 miles. And the vehicle is EPA rated 84. So obviously, this tool gives a more optimistic estimate. Yeah, the picture was in metric units, so I apologize. This is in kilometers, Celsius and stuff. So anyway, so I would like to kind of pause and give chance to everyone else to share their winter driving experience. I would like to hear from everyone just to see the different models of the vehicles. You know, in my case, just before I go, so we have Nissan Leaf 2015 and we have Chevy Bolt 2017. And what I noticed that, and there is lots of halo about vehicles that have a heat pump. And you know, at the beginning of my EV ownership, I thought that it would be great. And then I realized that at temperatures around freezing and a little bit up, this is when I am perfectly fine not using the cabin heater, and I just use the steering wheel heater or seat heater, and this is good enough. And this is when the heat pump would actually kick in if I had the heat pump and if I wanted to save on the energy. But when the temperature goes below freezing, and I don't know exactly when is the threshold, then the heat pump actually is discontinued. I mean, the system doesn't use it and it switches to resistive heating because there is only so much heat that you can extract from the outside. So in my case, you know, if it's really cold, then yes, I want to turn on the heat, but at this point, it would be resistive heat anyway. So heat pump would not really help me. So I'm pretty happy that neither of my cars doesn't have the heat pump, but obviously it's a personal preference. The other thing is how many people you have in the vehicle. If I drive by myself, I just, you know, turn on the steering wheel heater, as I mentioned, and I'm not saying it's normal, but I stopped using the heater if I'm sitting just by myself. But if I have the whole family, that's out of question. I have to start heating because, you know, it's good for the family. Also, the windshield fogging is much more likely because everybody's breathing. So that's how I deal with winter driving, and also it's actually not problem overall because if my typical driving requires charging less frequently than every day, then in winter I just charge more often, and that's all. So who wants to be the next?
I've got a good story.
Cool, go ahead.
So like I'm sure you guys do, I do the preheat thing when it's plugged in, and then I just try to use the seats and the steering wheel. We have a blanket for the back seat of the Volt when we take the kids places. In the Leaf, you know, we're usually not in the car that long, so it's not really a big issue, but the range is a big deal, as you guys know. And I have this one story. About 5 years ago, there was this massive blizzard that hit New Jersey. I don't know if you guys remember, but it was right at rush hour. Like it was like 3 o'clock or something like that when the blizzard hit. And everybody was leaving early and things like that. And I was like, no, you know, it'll be okay. You know, so I leave like maybe 3 or 4 from the office.
Yeah, wait, I want to interrupt you. That blizzard hit like 5 minutes before schools were supposed to be let out.
Right.
There were kids in our school district that you could walk to in 20 minutes that took 3 hours to get home that night.
Yeah, exactly. And our daycare provider was waiting for us, and she stayed late.
I mean, legally, that sent them to the cops, right? I mean, what are you going to do?
Yeah, we tipped her that night. But
I don't mean to interrupt. I'm sorry, but that was one heck of a night.
Yeah, so I mean, you remember, right? And so I started going home, right? And so when I'm in the Leaf, you know, the Leaf has crappy, you guys know, right? The Leaf has crappy battery degradation, and it doesn't have any thermal management, so it's kind of a nightmare. And when when I'm going on trips and I'm not sure I'm going to make it, I turn on the navigation computer, which is usually pretty good. After, you know, you start driving for a little bit, it'll tell you whether you're going to make it or not. So the navigation computer, I was traveling literally like 2 miles per hour. Like, I mean, you could walk faster than I was driving on this trip, right? I only live 12 miles from where I work, okay? And it said I wasn't going to make it, right? So I played a video game all the way home, which was the windows would start to fog up, right? And I just wouldn't be able to see. So I would turn on the you know, what do they call it? The defroster thing, just long enough to clear the window, and then I turn it back off. And I played that game, and as soon as I would turn the thing on, it would say, "You're not gonna make it home. Would you like me to help you find a charging station?" And then I would get the window clear, and then I'd turn it off, and then it would say, "Okay, you're gonna make it." You know, it was ridiculous. And I made it, and I had like 2 miles left when I got home. Like, it was scary, and it took me 4 hours to go 12 miles.
I actually discovered that in those electric vehicles, if you go very slowly, that actually it lowers the range as well, because then the overhead that, you know, the whole system has to be running, that actually starts eating up into the range.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and now when you said 5 years ago, I remember that too. It was not the worst experience that I got. My first experience was actually like that in, I think it was 2013 or 14. I was returning from work, and I remember I was also underestimating the situation, and my Mitsubishi i-MiEV, I already had the diesel heater in it. But I failed to refill it. So I actually didn't have even enough diesel to heat the vehicle. I didn't have, the way how I installed the diesel heater, that I actually removed the electric, and in that spot, I installed the diesel heater. So I remember that on that day, I returned back to work because I only made about 1 mile over half an hour or so. So I returned back, I parked the vehicle there, and I walked home, okay, which in my case, it's 5.5 miles. But there was a critical moment. About 1 mile, I needed to cross the river, right? And this is when I have seen what was happening after the river. So that was Raritan River in New Brunswick and Landing Lane. After you cross the river, there is a slope, it goes uphill, right? And guess what? There was no salt, nothing. So the vehicles were just, sliding, and volunteers were pushing the vehicles upwards. And so because there was not enough volunteers, so that's why the whole road was backed up, and I didn't know it. So this is when I actually applied my creative thinking, and I said, I'm going to strike a deal. I'm going to help someone and then ask them to drive me home, which was at this point about 4 miles. So I remember that this is how I got home. A stranger took me home. Okay, end of story.
November 15th, 2017, I believe. Is that the date we're talking about?
No. That must have been 2013 or 14.
Okay.
With my Mitsubishi.
Okay, I was thinking what Alex was talking about.
Alex, you are muted, Alex. But he's talking about maybe 5 years ago.
No, Alex.
Yeah, it could have been 5 years ago, because I know I had already had a little bit of range degradation, so it wouldn't have been in 2013.
Alex was 17 when we had that.
17.
It was very nice. Nobody predicted it. Then all of a sudden it came in midday. Everybody started going, and I remember that day. I was up in, where was I? I think I was up in, I'm going to say Somerset, and had to come home. Then I had to go back to Jersey City for a meeting, and they didn't cancel the meeting. And I'm like, are you insane? Like, okay, what the hell? Let me just go try it. And I was so lucky that I had gone to school in Newark, so I knew every single back road in Newark and Jersey City. And so I just kept zigzagging my way up the hill. And it was crazy that day.
And you were driving a BMW i3, right?
Yeah, that was an interesting day. But my favorite winter story actually belongs to my wife, because she normally takes the car, leaves it at Princeton Junction Station. And I think it was this was when we had our 16, our first one. And we had one of these freak storms that, again, nobody expected, right? It was predicted to be mild, and all of a sudden it just came in out of nowhere. And we had, at that point, implemented the preconditioning twice a day, once in the morning before she goes to the train station, and then she arrives usually right around 6 p.m. on the train back. So that was already working. So she gets to the car, she gets off the train. There's probably 150, 200 people that come off the train with her. And normally when she gets to the end of the parking lot with a stop sign, usually there's at least 5, 10 cars ahead of her. So she gets to her car, she gets in, she goes down, she comes to the end of the parking lot, and she goes, where is everybody? I know everybody got off the train with me. Why am I the only car at the end of the parking lot? And she looks around and she realizes that everybody's out there scraping and trying to keep their car. Meanwhile, she gets to her car is totally defrosted. It's 72 degrees inside, and it's, perfect, right? So came home and said, that's it. I'm never driving any of our other cars again. I'm only driving the i3 exclusively in our discussion. Because if it can't do this, I don't want to touch it. And same thing in the summer. She gets to the car and everybody's trying to cool their car down, and her car's already done. And I will say that this year, the big change for us is after 4 years, and on the third one, we finally put in a level 2 charger. And we didn't have to put in the level 2 charger, because up until this one that we just got, BMW was running a promo where they provided 2 years unlimited charging at EVgo. And the closest EVgo DCFC is 2 miles from my house. So for the first 2 cars, my job was essentially to always make sure the car was topped up, go down to the mall, grab a donut, grab a coffee, plug the car in, grab a donut, grab a coffee. By the time I'm done with my donut and coffee, back to the car is full. But this year, literally the day we picked up our 2020 was the day that my EVgo program expired. And of course, the dealer hadn't charged the car. So I'm there at Brookfield, I think is Garden State Parkway, right about 150. I tap the card goes, who are you? What do you mean, who am I? Just start the charging. We have no idea who you are. Pay us. I'm like, pay you? Are you kidding me? And that day, I think was the first time I paid for public charging. I had to spend like $10. And the first 30 days we had the car, I spent like $100 in public charging because I was just running around too much. And my wife said, okay, I think it's time for you to put in that level 2 charger thingy, because this is ridiculous, especially at $100 a month. So for us, the winter driving actually hasn't been all that difficult. And I was really surprised when we were looking at our first i3, the dealer had loaned us the car for the weekend, and we picked it up on Saturday, and we were supposed to come back on Monday. And of course, Sunday, we had a blizzard, and we dumped, I think we had like 18 inches of snow, and I'm going, oh my God, we're done. This car is never going anywhere. And I actually got in the car, and because it has such narrow tires, it literally just cuts through the snow. It's actually one of the best handling vehicles in the snow for us. And I don't even use winter tires. So it's like, okay, great. So now we've now been a one-car household for about 18 months, only on the I3. Our 2 ICE vehicles are away. One is in Boston with our son, and the other one's in Queens with our daughter. So I'm now actually looking at a second car. So tomorrow, I don't know yet. I'm undecided. I think right now I'm, God forbid, gasp, I may probably buy an ICE vehicle as an interim vehicle, and then over the summer get
when the rebate gets back, right?
Exactly. And now it's not even, wasn't even a function of the rebate, because at least for us, a lot of people were upset December 15th when the rebate just unexpectedly stopped, right? We got our I3 in July, and the rebates were just coming online. People were just figuring out how to do it. For us, we were going to get the car anyway. The rebate was icing on the cake. But for the second one, yeah, the rebate's going to play a big part of it. And this time around, it will probably not be a BMW. God forbid, it'll be another one. It'll be a different brand, and everybody's like, "Oh, you defector," but it'll be okay. In the interim, I'll get an inexpensive ICE car just to tide me over for a couple of months, and go from there.
Have you, has anyone had trouble? I had this thing that happened once with my Nissan Leaf. I have a 2018 Nissan Leaf, and most of the time, once a week, I have to take a commute from Maplewood, New Jersey to Ewing, New Jersey, which is just outside of Trenton. And in the summer, I can always make that if I'm fully charged, right? And in the winter, I'm really good about managing, the heat. Then I can make it.
It gets exciting.
Yeah, if only one person, it's a game. If only one person is in the car and I only have the seat warmer on and the steering wheel warmer on, then I can make it, unless it's really, really cold. But a couple of times I've had this thing happen where, it was really cold and I wasn't going to make it, or I was nervous and I didn't want to be silly and really get stuck. That I tried to do DC fast charging in the extreme cold, and it kept on kicking me off. Has anybody else had that experience where it's the charger that's having an issue?
Well,
yeah,
that's a good question.
Yeah. Is this a Leaf? What kind of car was this?
Leaf, yeah.
This is Nissan Leaf.
2018.
Yeah.
I've had issues where it's charged very slow. Once the battery reaches maybe at the beginning it's fast, but then just because it's so cold, it's just charging really slow on the fast charger.
Right.
I've had that happen.
The battery management system should recognize that when the temperature of the battery is low, it should not charge fast, because then you hit the problem of the lithium doesn't intercalate into the anode, but it forms those little
crystals.
wires. What's the word, Andy?
Tin whiskers?
I think they're crystals.
Yeah. Okay. And then if it shorts, then you get thermal runaway and fire and whatnot. So I was recently charging my 2015 Leaf on CHAdeMO, and it was cold temperature. And I had single-digit %, so it was very low. I think it was 7%, and I think it started at 100 amps actually. So either the older Leafs do not have this low temperature programmed in, or maybe the battery was not cold enough.
Yeah, I'd been running it for, I'd been driving the whole time, so maybe it had, but I was at Menlo Park Mall, and the chargers are up on a hill, and so I was at the top of this hill with the wind slicing across me, and every time I had to every 5 minutes or so I had to get out of the car and start the thing again, and it charged me $5 every time as the initial fee every time I restarted the car.
Oh my goodness.
And you're at that point where it doesn't even matter, you just have to get the car charged so you can get home. And it was the most miserable experience. It's the only time I've ever been like, this car, why did I buy this car? It was the only time I've ever felt that way.
Tracy, I'm curious, with all those Connect charges, were you able to get any of that money back? Do you call them and say, hey, this is, look at the billing, this doesn't make sense?
You know what's really interesting about it? It's almost like they caught themselves because it kept saying it was going to charge me an initial fee, but then when I checked the bill, it looked like it only charged me the one. And then,
yeah, I mean, it should be smart enough to realize you're at the same station, you have multiple recurring, it's just one session. So
of course, I did do that thing where I changed from one, you know how they have names? I changed from like Donnie to Marie or whatever.
Yeah.
And I did get charged the initial $5 when I changed because I was going to see if one of the other stations would work better. But that, didn't
Tracy,
necessarily feel it. Yeah.
You've got an 18. I'm assuming a regular Leaf, not the Leaf Plus.
Oh, no, I don't think that's the last year they didn't have the Leaf Plus, I think.
Yeah, so you have the smaller capacity battery in the second generation body.
40 kilowatts, kilowatt hours, I believe.
It's exciting some days. my benchmark was always to be able to go to New York and come home without charging, right? And now this third generation does that quite comfortably. But even the other day, I had to go up to Muncie, New York, about 100 miles. And that was an exciting day on the road because by the time I got up there, the closest DCFC was at BMW North America. And those puppies only do 25 kilowatts, not 50. And then the next furthest one down was 30 miles down the road in Bloomfield. So I had no choice. I had to go to BMW, juice up a little bit to get to Bloomfield and then, juice up even more. But it was an interesting day. Caleb, I had a question for you because I know you have a SR Plus, I believe.
Yeah.
Right. And the other day you were commenting about your trip down to, I think it was Atlanta or something.
Yep.
And you were saying how it took you far longer than you would prefer to because it was an SR Plus instead of the long range.
Well, yeah. I mean, it added, I think it only added 2.5 hours to the trip.
Okay, that's not so bad.
For compared to an ICE vehicle.
Right.
But the problem that I have, and I've done this trip multiple times, is I don't go the I-95 corridor. I take 78 to 81.
West to 81 and then parallel.
The problem with that corridor is that the stations are separated out, and you can plot a route. If you got, I live in Fanwood, plot Fanwood to Atlanta, force it to go 81 on a better route planner. I could do a presentation and bring it up. But the problem is that the stations are spread out such that with an SR Plus, you kind of have to take the same route. There's no real options. I spent 45 minutes one day, like, what if I charged a little bit longer here or a little bit less? I wanted to get off that cycle, but I still couldn't do it because the stations were just spread out in such a way that I had to do it. And two of the stations are about 7 miles east or west of the north-south trip that I was taking. So I'd go down, I'd have to get off the highway, go 7 miles east, charge, then 7 miles back. So I'm wasting another 20 minutes on top of the normal charging. And that to me was the painful part. Now I will tell you, Tesla just released their new maps, the new chargers stations that they plan on building this year. And they're putting 4 new chargers along this route in the next 12 months, hopefully. And so I think a lot of that will kind of get solved. And that's the thing is, we just need more,
Caleb, was this issue related to cold temperature or you would have this issue even in summer?
Nope, I had this issue anytime. The only way that cold affected it, because I was trying to like I said, spread out, like skip one of those ones that are that are off the road, is that I could only, I have a 240 mile range, which I'll tell you, I've never gotten more than 190 miles on it. And there was one stretch, if I wanted to skip this bad charger, I would have had to go like 185 miles, which I knew in the cold weather, there's no way I would have been able to do, so it wasn't even worth trying. So I do have, it's not really a cold weather horror story, but on this route on the way to Atlanta, there was a horrible accident and the road was shut down and we spent almost an hour stopped. Mm-hmm. And about a half an hour in, I realized like, oh crap, we were planning on getting to the next charger with 15%. How is it going to look now? And I looked and I was below 0. And that's when I freaked out. That's the only time I've ever actually freaked out driving my Tesla.
Does it mean that you were stranded?
Well, no, I still had power where I was, but because I had already been stopped for an hour, now to get to where I was planning on going and where I had to go was next to nothing. So we turned off everything in the car, and I drove, 55, 60 miles an hour instead of 75. The speed limit's down there is 70. So when we got moving again, we drove at a slow speed to make it. We pulled in with like 3%, I think.
Okay.
Hey man, I pulled in with 0 or bar many a time, man. That's nothing. That's nothing.
I haven't done that. Okay, Caleb, what's your worst case winter actual range?
So I can't answer
the
that.
SR Plus is when you got it, I'm assuming it was probably 225 officially, somewhere in that range, and now I think it's like 263 because they bumped the range.
My car is rated at 240.
Right.
But I can't, even in warm weather, I can't get to Washington, D.C., and that's like 200 miles exactly. Right. I've gone there 3 times, and I've never been able to make it to D.C. without having to fuel up on the way.
That's weird.
Yeah, it's very frustrating to me, to be honest.
Because with my Bolt, I can comfortably make it to Washington, D.C.
Yeah,
on single charge.
That's my biggest pet peeve with the Tesla, that I can't. I'd love to be able to make it to DC.
I tell you that there is actually a different algorithm how the range is calculated. I heard the explanation on Engineering Explained on the YouTube channel, that if you want to go through the more complicated way, which Tesla does, then you include also the HVAC cycle. And that gives you actually longer range. But most car makers are actually doing just simple tests when they do the city driving and highway, and I think it's a 40-60 percentile of this or that, and this is what you get. So if Chevy decided to do the same methodology as Tesla for Bolt, it would be probably 260, 270. The older range, the one that is rated 238 miles. So it would have easily another 20 miles.
Yeah, it's very frustrating. I bought the 240 mile. I don't regret the purchase, but I knew it wouldn't get 240, but I thought I could get 200. And if you route from Fanwood to DC, it's exactly 200 miles, and I can't get there, and it's very frustrating. That said, I found parking garages in DC that have free chargers in them. So if there's not a riot going on in DC, I have driven to DC. You got to stop at a charger and get 5 minutes of chop off on the way down just to get there. But I park in this underground garage. It's got a free charger in it. It's like only $20 for a whole day. Plug in, go to the museums, do whatever, and you can drive home. It's awesome.
Yeah.
I guess you've just solidified my wife's statement that we need to get a long range.
Yeah.
Just pony up the additional, whatever that is, 7-8 grand and call it a day.
Yeah. I don't regret the purchase, but looking back at it and knowing that in the 2 years since I bought it, my financial situation is better than I thought it might be.
Model 3s, they don't depreciate those vehicles. So, if you sell it now, you may get good amount of money for that, and upgrade. Anyway, David, you didn't speak yet. What is your experience?
Well, probably similar to others, shutting off the heat, freezing. So first, just a reminder for those who don't know, I used to have a Nissan Leaf for 3 years. I leased one for, I think it was a 2016 or 2017. And now I have a Hyundai Ioniq, which I've had for 1.5 years now. So no crazy stories, although I did just tell you recently, not a cold weather story, but I almost ran out of the battery. It went into protection mode about 1 mile from my house. Wouldn't let me drive faster than about 15 miles per hour. But I made it home. So that that's I mean, I've come close a couple times, but been lucky.
Mm-hmm.
I would, if you don't mind, I'd like to comment on a couple of the graphs that you put up because I think they're fantastic.
Thank
Do
you.
you mind showing those again?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
The first two in particular, I think, are just chock full of good information.
This one.
Yeah, I mean, again, the left-hand side,
Mm-hmm.
spot on based on my experience. Again, with the Nissan Leaf in particular, lost a ton of range during winter.
Mm-hmm.
But good to see the actual numbers for gasoline vehicles, because I think, you know, I've certainly heard that. I think the difference is, again, the issue here is range, right? So
Yeah,
you're not worried about the
obviously.
range with a gas vehicle typically.
Yeah, because refueling is a physical process. You are pumping liquid from one tank to another, while charging is heavy duty chemistry. So of course, you know, it's not as fast.
Yeah, so it's a range once battery get to the point where, you know, they are synonymous with, you know, the range of gas vehicles, you know, that basically goes to the wayside. The graph on the right, I think, again, fascinated by this because that's my general impressions. I think the first two big ones that are obviously huge negatives for EVs, we already have solutions for. And so I think it's just, as a non-Tesla owner in particular, these are going to become part of the standard for EVs going forward. We're starting to see some of these be standard now. It's actually discouraging to me when I look for information on an electric vehicle. I still can't even find it from the manufacturers a lot of times. For example, I have a 2019 Hyundai Ioniq. It doesn't tell me anywhere that it has a heat pump, but I found somewhere online that suggests that my limited model does, and that the 2020 models don't. They decided not to do them anymore. So it's really a struggle, I think, to find information. But I think over time, again, as EVs start to become the standard, it'll be as standard as seeing, you know, how many cylinders, engine do you have, you know, that kind of thing. A lot of searching online, you can't search for, you know, all the things that, you know, electric vehicle would have necessarily. But I think in terms of heating the cabin, easy solution there too is not only heat pump, but as some mentioned, having heated seats and heated steering wheel. I think those should be standard in all cars, all electric vehicles actually. And I'm actually appalled at the inventory of Nissan Leafs that I've been seeing lately here in New Jersey, that very few of them actually have it as standard anymore, because mine did have it, and we would not have survived without it. It's much easier to heat a seat or a steering wheel than the air in a car. Much more efficient in terms of electricity. I did want to comment on that other list of 8 things for EVs, which looks like you got from Geotab. Just that I've seen similar lists, and I mean, I think we all know that electric vehicles, while they're not perfect, they have huge advantages. You do need to do a couple things differently, maybe. But I feel like every time I see a list of more than 3 or 4 things that you should do related to an electric vehicle, I think we're doing a disservice to them. I feel like we're promoting a myth that that electric vehicles are less convenient, more troublesome than gas vehicles. So, I mean, there's obviously valid things on that list. And some of those would be in a list of 3 or 4 that I would put out there.
It's meant to help as opposed to deter, but I understand your point. My prior question was whether I want to drive gas or electric, and I answered it. And so when I want to drive electric, what do I have to do differently, right? So that's why we have this meeting.
Sure. Yeah, one of them was inflate your tires. You have to do that, or you should do that on gas vehicles too. So it's, you know, again, they're all good things you should for every vehicle in some of the cases, some not necessarily specific to EVs. I guess the only other comment in terms of my experiences that I did want to mention is about traction, because I've seen this and experienced it myself too. And again, non-Tesla vehicles that I've been dealing with are all front-wheel drive. So I don't know of a vehicle yet, an EV yet outside of Teslas that are
Well,
rear-wheel drive.
No, Andy has BMW i3, right? So this is rear-wheel drive.
Yeah.
So
The i3 is?
Oh
Yep.
yeah.
Okay. All right. I think
a lot
that's
of
the
fun.
only other one I know of, though.
Well,
'cause
my
I've
first
looked
EV
around.
Mitsubishi IMF was also rear-wheel drive. You know,
Okay.
and it had wonderful traction. Wonderful.
Sure.
Oh, can
So-
I share a winter snow story? Are you soliciting winter snow stories, David?
No. Oh, no. I just wanted to mention one more thing. That is the front-wheel drive is the standard for, vehicles in general. And, manufacturers that are switching over or creating some EVs haven't switched away from that for the most part yet. And that's actually the biggest disadvantage I've run into with both the Leaf and the Ioniq is that your traction is even in good conditions isn't as great when you're trying to pull the vehicle as opposed to pushing it. And anytime it's wet or snowy, it's generally not good. Part of the problem is that we mentioned is that they put tires on it that are meant to maximize range and not traction, and that's a big problem. And then for low range vehicles, that makes sense. So once we get the batteries bigger, better range, put some better tires on it, that will help. But also switching to rear-wheel drive or all-wheel drive, obviously, will help a lot. So just want to mention that in terms of traction.
Jason, do you have something to add? Are you with us?
Hello. You hear me?
Hello. Yes.
All right. You guys covered most of the main things. I think a lot of the things that you're saying, I mean, most of us on this call, I would believe are experienced owners. But I know a lot of things that we're talking about today scare new owners from getting electric vehicles, especially when you're here in the Northeast and not in Florida. But I don't really think it's that scary. I have a Tesla, so I haven't really had any problems as far as range or anything like that. My commute is maybe 30, 40 miles round trip. So even when it is snowing and cold, I mean, like, you turn on the heat and, like you said earlier, you just charge more. It really only matters if you're going on a trip like over an hour.
And your vehicle is Model 3, the long range performance. So your range is over 300, right?
Correct. More like 280 right now, but that's a different story. Another thing I didn't see anyone mention was regen. I don't know about other cars, but Tesla has an option where you could lower the regen so it's not as strong. That I know some people do that in the winter. So that especially if it's snowing or icy, and it just makes it easier if there's less regen, so it doesn't break with regen so hard and cause you to slide due to that. So some cars might have a setting where you could lower that so it's not as strong. If anyone has auto folding mirrors, again, this is not related to just EVs, but if you have auto folding mirrors, it's generally good to disable those so it doesn't burn out the motor if it freezes.
These are all good comments.
I think we also briefly, somebody mentioned about when you preheat, obviously if you're home, you want to do that while you're plugged in. So you use grid power and not power from your battery, which will just lower your range. And the last thing, I don't know how many other EVs might have that, but at least the performance Teslas, they come with summer tires when you buy them. And you can't be driving on those under 40 degrees. So make sure you have the right tires on your car. Most people probably already have all seasons, but make sure you have either all seasons or winter tires. And that's all I could think of.
And even all seasons, when it gets really, really cold, you get below freezing, below, say, 20, 25, you really should have snow tires on them because the compound just starts to get hard as well.
Yeah, I have all season myself. I didn't get winter because I think they're too soft of a compound, and we get 1, maybe 2 snowstorms a year, if that, lately. and I don't necessarily need to be driving in them for work or anything. So I figure that you're gonna lose more range 99% of the time driving around with soft winter tires and not too bad weather. So
Jason,
I made the all season. Yeah.
So I want to tell you my winter experience. When it snowed the other day, we just got a couple inches of snow.
Okay.
I live at home. I work at home. I eat at home. I don't go out. So that's
All
not, and there's a pandemic going on, I heard. So I'm not allowed out of the house. But a couple of days later, I went to run a quick errand, and apparently the town didn't really want to plow the roads either. And so, I get in the car in my driveway. Or in my garage. I did not preheat it because I'm just running a quick errand. I don't need to preheat it for that. And I get to the end of the block, and by habit, I know where I'm going 30 miles an hour, 25, 30 miles an hour. I let off the gas pedal and regen kicks in and I slow down. Because it was cold, it wasn't regenning. And then I'm like, oh crap, I got to put the brakes on. And I lock up the brakes and slid right through the intersection. And so I don't look at that as you mentioned that some people put regen into a lower mode in the winter, which I don't understand, like if that's a good or a bad thing. Well, for me, regen got me in trouble because I was expecting it to do something and it didn't.
It was related to traction itself.
Yours was then your battery was cold, so you had limited regen.
Correct.
It shows the little dots on the screen.
Oh yeah. Oh, I know it did. When you turn on, when you turn on the car, a big green pop-up window comes up. You get a modal that says you wanted no regen.
So you wanted the opposite, but I guess so. What will happen though if you're on a longer trip, or if your car is fully preheated and it is warmed up, then you would have had a strong regen during that situation. So if you were warmed up, you may want to lower it. I don't do it personally, but I've heard enough people say they do that.
Is there a potential that it locks up the rear wheels? Why would you not want to have a strong regen in the winter?
I guess I don't do it personally. But I guess I've heard a lot of people say that they do that. I guess I know how to drive my car.
Yeah,
so, to me,
well, apparently I don't. So
yeah. No, I wasn't saying that to you. I was saying that to the people who.
Yeah, I know you
make
were.
It lower.
Well, so on a motorcycle, when the roads are inclement, when they're wet, normally on a motorcycle you downshift all the time, and so going into a turn, I might downshift before I get into the turn. But when the roads are wet, I don't downshift because my brakes, I have analog brakes on the motorcycle, but if you downshift, you don't have analog brakes and you can lose the rear tire.
Yeah, I mean, I just know that like the regen, the heavy regen is pretty much the same as braking. So if you're crawling up to a stop sign or something, or approaching a car in the winter, you just got to be conscious that your regen might be strong enough to make you slip.
Yeah.
So you don't want to let off that accelerator as much as you might on clear, dry roads.
Yeah, correct. The public service announcement, don't do what I did. If you have ice at the end of your road, make sure you're braking.
Yeah.
Can we move on?
I think Tesla, when regen is limited and you run into that situation that I'm positive you're not the only one that's run into, where you think you have regen and you don't. I think they should be able to do something like, remember when they came out with hold mode, which they didn't always have, and now it will bring the car to a complete stop at 0. I think that when, instead of showing that little thing on the screen when your regen is limited, which nobody sees, and then you're like, ooh, the car's not slowing down, and you sit to the brake, they should simulate regen in the case where it's not warm enough to use real regen. They should simulate it with the friction,
apply the brakes.
With the friction brakes.
Yeah, I say it could just, it slows you at a known rate. They could apply the brakes at that same known rate to.
Yeah, I mean, it should be an option like anything else, but I think they should have that so you have a consistent experience and it doesn't depend on the weather.
That would be that's actually a very genius idea. I had not heard elsewhere. And just for the record, anyone buying a new Tesla, the newer vehicles do not have the ability to change regen power from light to standard. I believe they got rid of that, right, Jason?
Yeah, I believe that's true.
Guys, thank you so much for the conversation. Can we move on?
Sure.
Yeah. So we kind of mentioned that the ChargeUp New Jersey rebate is no longer available, although I shouldn't say no longer because it will come back in summer. But I already mentioned in some communication that we should not expect this to be $5,000 again, because the way how it was calculated just didn't make sense. If they have a 30 million budget, under a nice situation when there is no COVID, most people would buy electric vehicle that has at least 200 miles range. So if you divide 30 million by 5,000, you get 6,000. So so 6,000 vehicles per year. That's even less than what we used to have a couple of years ago. So that definitely is not a way how to promote. So. But speaking of that, ChargEVC, in collaboration with RideWise, they will have another round of conversation next week. So I'll go through, but I'm kind of jumping back and forth. So let me just go to the next slide. So just about the drive-through light show. We eventually moved it to Monday, December 14th, because we wanted to beat the traffic, which turned out to be a good idea. So these are just some selected images. It was fantastic. I also taped video, but this is not something that I want to show here because it's just waste of time. On the upper left image, you see Alex in his vault. And in the center is what I wish to be a line of electric vehicles, but unfortunately, there were only 2 of us. But as we were approaching in the line, we have seen some Teslas. So technically speaking, there were plenty of electric vehicles in the show. So this is the RideWise event. If you want to register, click on this link. You have to use the original version, obviously, of my presentation. They will be talking about, I think they're looking for ideas, what's the best way to promote electric vehicles, because the rebate, even though it was wonderful, but it didn't do what it was supposed to. So it's morning, January 14th. I know that most of us, you have jobs, so 9 to 10 is probably not the best, but I'm still throwing it up. Webinars. So Force is a wonderful source, as I mentioned. And so these are lists on this slide and the next slide for the first quarter of this year. Electrified community car sharing in January, then in February, driving, change, designing, and financing transportation electrification projects. Then next level power, inductive charging. You may have heard inductive charging is somewhat less efficient, but it's very, very comfortable because you just have this pad on the floor in your garage, and you just drive over and it charges your vehicle overnight, or whatever you charge it, whatever you program it to do. These are in March. The one on the left is it's about electric airplanes, electric plane. The one in the center is boats. Who is talking? Is it Alex? I hear noises in background. And also our peer chapter, and led by Elaine Borseth, in San Diego, they will have interesting webinar coming up on January 13th, a week from now. They will talk about the lithium harvesting technology, something that Elon Musk was referring to during the battery day. It is based on molecular filtering technology, because lithium is small metal, so you have a porous material that will filter the lithium ion, and that saves substantial amount of energy and is much more efficient in extracting. And second part will be overview of Polestar 2 through one of the chapter members, Mark. So I certainly recommend. They request registrations through well, okay, the link is on Meetup, but if you hit the link, this one, it will just guide you to register so that you can receive the actual Zoom link. Oh, sorry, this is previous slide from last month. The reason I left it in because we had a small meeting on December 28th. And the result of it was that I want to put more content during our meeting, specifically tips and help for EV drivers, so that it brings some values. Like today, we were talking about driving tips. Winter driving tips. Next time we can talk about hypermiling. Then we can talk about charging, or installing a charging station at home. So there are lots of tips and tricks that we can go through. So that's it. And the next meeting, stay tuned. We will be again on February 3rd, which is 4 or 5 weeks from today. And we don't have any speaker yet. If you have any idea, please let me know for next month, as well as for anything coming up. If you have an idea about EV shows, obviously when the COVID is over, bring it to our attention. I was contacted by a guy from Brick. So that's South Jersey. So I need to follow up with those folks from South Jersey. So that's about it for today. We had a very good conversation about the winter driving tips. What else is going on, guys?
I got a kitten. Has nothing to do with electric cars, but it's cool.
You got a kitten?
Yeah.
Or your kids got kitten?
Well, it's a family kitten. Oh yeah. I'll think about ideas for speakers and if you have any ideas come out.
I was just trying to show my son. He's escaping from the view.
But seriously, look at the product of my wonderful work here today in chat.
Anita, thank you for attending. Oh, she is already off. Okay. So I'm going to stop the recording.